Should be good to go.
Okay, well, good morning. Chris Cassavant of the Superintendent of Schools, Narragansett Regional. I want to welcome everyone who is out there in cyberspace to our parent forum in regards to the reopening plan for fall 2020. Before we get started, I just want to certainly let you know the folks behind the scenes. You will definitely hear and see Ms. Kate Cleese, who's the Assistant Superintendent. She will be manning the PowerPoint and will certainly be an active part in this discussion. Ms. Susan Varney, who is my administrative assistant, who will really runs the show, and so she'll keep me on track, hopefully. And obviously, and always thanks to the great folks at TCTV, Steve Castle and his crew, who have been invaluable with the meetings and setting us up. So I want to thank them. So what we're here to do today, and there'll be another version of, hopefully another version of this at 5 o'clock, although I hear that there's quite a storm coming in, so hopefully the power stays with us. But want to go over a couple of things. First off, we want to talk about the plan that we discussed last week in terms of reopening. And in doing so, we created a PowerPoint that we'll use here today, which we've added to. Also, we will talk about some of the conversations that took place during the last school committee meeting. We asked for folks to submit questions to us, and you most certainly did. We had over 110 folks participate or submit questions, well over 230 questions from 110 folks, which we whittled down to somewhere around about 130. There were many duplicates, etc. So to that point, as you can imagine, there were some topics that had more questions. People were requesting more information in some topics than in others. So in those topics, we actually created a slide that a general overview of or a summary of the majority of questions. And in some of the other categories, there weren't a lot of questions. We didn't create a slide, but we'll still address them. Out of the 230 questions or comments, they broke down into several areas: scheduling, busing or transportation, lunch, the exact nature of the cohort schedule, which we'll discuss a lot, special education, rigor and instruction during either remote or hybrid, extended day, technology, health and safety, which, as you can imagine, was a big one, and we'll actually start off with health and safety, and instruction. So obviously, we want to start off with safety. Busing, social distance limits, how many students we can transport on a bus. Students must wear a mask on the bus, and we'll get to the exact pieces of the busing. But as many folks know, especially at the elementary levels, our buses are full. Normally, usually at the middle and high school levels, we sit 2 to a seat. Elementary, it's appropriate to sit 3 to a seat. That, of course, is not going to be able to take place. So we'll definitely talk about busing and transportation. Lunches, social distancing requirements makes making assembling 200 students at one time very, very difficult. We do have 2 cafeterias at the middle high school. We have one very large and very nice cafeteria at the elementary school, but the requirements around eating are problematic. That one, they have to be 6 feet apart, and in order not to have a mask, and they have to be facing the same direction unless you have plexiglass setups, etc. So that also weighed into our decision making. Schedule, classroom floor space can only accommodate about half of our students at one time, and that obviously, with masks, and that was our biggest hurdle. As everyone knows, the state through the Department of Ed stated that it was optimal at six feet. between students to be no more than or no less than 3 feet. We were just not in the position to fit as many kids as we have in this district at 6 feet, which we will talk about. So students can be 6 feet apart without masks. We know that. Unfortunately, the district neither has the space nor the staff to do this. Students can be 3 feet apart with masks. We can do this if we use a 2-group cohort of students to reduce the number of students present at one time. And of course, students wearing masks. Classes, of course, the classrooms need to be deep cleaned between groups and cohorts. And that, I want to make sure that we're clear about that. Really what we're talking about is when those cohorts switch or when classes switch at the middle and high school, and we'll get into that. So as you can imagine, we had quite a few questions regarding safety, and I'm going to talk about a few here right now. Know this, that by tomorrow morning, after both presentations are complete, on the NRSD website, we will have a page dedicated to COVID-19, all things COVID-19. We were putting them on our main page, but the documentation, it was so much of it that it was literally hard. We were running out of space. So by tomorrow morning, we will have almost everything I'm going to talk about here today up on the website for your perusal, and to include the FAQ. So one of the many questions was directed at what happens if someone, whether it be a teacher, a student, staff member, etc., either actually has COVID or has the symptoms. And so DESE, the Department of Ed, put out guidance from the CDC on or about middle of January. And if I could just simply share the screen just for a second, what I want to do, and this will be my only sharing, because I don't ever dare, but this document right here that I'm sharing with everyone, which will be on the webpage, goes through every scenario, whether a student, whether a staff member, if staff member gets sick, if a student is sick at home. It's about 19 pages, roughly, a little bit more than that, and it really highlights the step-by-step procedures that not only the district but folks need to take. This it's not exclusive to us. This can be found on the DESE website under their COVID section as well. So what I want to say to you is that I received a lot of questions about when will you shut down the building? Will you shut down a school? Will you shut down a classroom? How will we know? How soon will we know? Will my child's name be used? And many of those questions are in this document. And really, although to a very complex question, the simple answer is, a local DPH will be involved, obviously, and the state. People will be notified as soon as we're notified. And of course, identity is not, we will not give out the identity. But the procedures here that are listed can be and are updated by the CDC. They haven't been updated since July 17th, but every scenario here, those questions will be found and will be adhered to once we start school. So I'm going to relinquish back to Kate. She can have the screen now. So like I said, there were quite a few questions surrounding that, but I don't want to minimize it, but there were so many intricacies to the questions that really the guidance really spells it out quite clear. I have to unshare. See, so this is the only reason why I don't share the screen. So some of the other parts other questions that we've had is, will students be permitted to bring backpacks and lunch boxes from home to school? Yes, students will be able to utilize backpacks and lunch boxes. The issue, though, is that we will not be able to use lockers. Now, when I get into the tech part of this, you will you'll understand that every child will have, if they don't have one already, a device. And we will talk about that a little bit, but no, you will not be used your locker, but you can in fact use backpacks. The protocol provided by the state, again, will be up on the website. Why aren't we using gyms, annex, both cafeterias, hallways, and outside areas to space students out? We are going to utilize every space available in all three buildings. We are exploring utilizing some space outdoors, but quite frankly, tents into those type of things have been, they've been hard to find, especially the tents that at the size that you would need to hold, a large number of students. But we will be utilizing those, every single piece of space that we have. And also what we're also talking about is utilizing the gyms in many, many ways too. Some of the other questions that we received is, do you have a plan in place for kids so they don't have to wear masks? Masks and the wearing of masks have been many questions around masks. Will masks be mandated? Yes, masks will be mandated unless they in fact have a note from a physician that says that they do not need to wear a mask. So that, in a nutshell, is the answer. We received a lot of questions about masks. People asked about consequences. People asked about what would happen if they don't. That's born through policy. We'll really have to get into the nitty-gritty around that, but masks will be required unless there is a medical reason why a student or a staff member doesn't need to wear the mask. And by the way, this is to include the bus, which we discussed earlier. So again, a lot of these questions were, how will you deal with asymptomatic children? Was an interesting question. And quite frankly, many folks don't know that they may be asymptomatic, but that's why you have protocols and procedures in place. So if folks are not feeling well, if either at home or here, the protocols are in place so that we can respond accordingly. But how we'll treat them is an interesting question because we may not know until someone tells us. And so that's why I go back to the masks. The masks are one of our best defenses against spread. So many of those questions, how many children at most will be in the classroom? Well, again, becomes a math problem. Depending on the size of the classroom and using the 3 foot, there'll be anywhere between 12 and 18 children in a room, K-12, depending on the size of the room, quite frankly. And so every room had to be measured. Every room had to be reviewed and to see if there was any additional furniture that could be moved out, and it has been. And so that is the safe answer. It may vary depending on the size of the rooms. Okay. Oh, if a vaccine becomes available and our children are vaccinated mid-year, will the school consider taking them for in-person learning? That is the hope. Obviously, we take our direction from DPH, from the state, et cetera. And, we're all hoping that that a vaccine is eminent, and but we will, of course, follow the guidance on that. So I really want to start off with safety, but again, that document, many questions about what happens if will be in that protocol, which it can be found on the DESE website right now, but will be on our website by tomorrow morning. So the state asked us, as everyone knows, to develop and to have approved 3 plans. Full in person. Remember that it had to be either 6 or 3, or at 6. Full remote, we just came out of that in March. And of course, a hybrid, which is part in person and part remote. I will say that after speaking with the commissioner yesterday, and at least the preliminary plans that were sent to the state, well over 90% were hybrid. So, it's, we're in the same boat as 90% of the group around us. So full in-person wasn't possible given these guidelines. When we measured all the rooms and we're looking at, any possibility that we could not accommodate them at 6 foot. Some buildings were better than others, that's for sure. Some schools were better than others. Some was a staffing issue because, again, you're still not going to put as many kids as we have in our elementary and our middle schools in these rooms at 6 foot, and in some cases, even in some rooms at 3 feet. So it was just not possible, is not possible with the state guidelines at this time to go full in person. But of course, that's ultimately our goal. Full remote, the plans are nearly ready for full remote instruction with schedules for each building. I want to stop there because when we did our second survey about how did it go, we received, quite frankly, a mixed bag. Some folks told us that they felt that the instruction was rigorous, that they had a lot of contact with folks via Google Meet, Google Classroom. Others did not. First, we were not prepared to go full remote on March 13th. I am, and I've said on several occasions that I'm very proud of how our staff adapted and reacted to that reality, which was happening in real time. But so those folks who are, have called for more rigorous instruction, that is definitely coming in terms of grading, et cetera. These schedules provide for regular interactions with teachers, and we'll get into that. So our hybrid plan A, which we talked about, is when we went to remote learning in the spring. We had no time, we just said that. Remote learning as part of our hybrid plan will include standards-based rigorous instruction. Said that. That's not, we're not just saying that, the state has required that. DESE has set the expectation, as I've said, student attendance and staff attendance is, the expectation is that they attend, even remotely, it counts. DESE has also set the expectation student work will be graded for credit as we normally do. Again, lots of folks, we were a little inconsistent in that manner. Some of us were further along than others, and we'll talk about how we're going to rectify that, but that's the expectation. And a lot of people asked, is the Mcas still in place? And as of right now, yes. Right now, the Mcas is still in play. So when we look at this, and folks, had a lot of questions about what is this hybrid plan A, and group A, group B, group C, and group D. We wanted to make sure that we let folks know that there is an option, that group D is full remote. And a lot of folks asked us, if I want my child to go full remote, is that a possibility? Because they have there's medical concern, et cetera. And the answer to that is yes. Other folks asked, well, how can I want my child to go to school? And that is our answer right now in terms of hybrid. They will be in, if you're hybrid A or B, and C is also involved in that group, right? Because they will all be in one of the groups, and they'll also receive some specialized instruction depending. They'll be in school, in school from 8:30 to 12:30. Yeah, 8:30 to 12:30 for the elementary, and we're going to talk about that. And I think 7:30 to, we'll get to the schedules, but we're not just doing half days. It's in terms of the time and learning, it is more, definitely more than a half day, and we'll get into that. It's 5 days of learning, and that's the expectation, and that's what we're going to provide. Group A, for example, in-person instruction, 2 days a week for partial days, transition home with a bag lunch. So if you're in Group A, you'll be Monday, Tuesday. You will transition home each day with a bag lunch. We'll talk about lunch in a little bit. And then after lunch, you will then have remote learning, which could be either in-person instruction or homework or independent work, etc. And that'll also include those folks whom if you're not in cohort A, you're in cohort B. So on Monday and Tuesday, you are receiving virtual or your instruction online in a sense, and you too will also have a schedule, which we'll get to. That Wednesday, oh, Kate raised her hand, so.
I just wanted to add something we didn't put on the slide is that the students in Group A and the students in Group B, we are trying to the best of our ability to keep families together so that if you have students in multiple grades, all of your family members would go to school on either Monday, Tuesday, or Wednesday, Thursday to make your scheduling a little bit easier.
Sorry. Thanks, Kate. And that's important. That was a huge piece. How can we keep folks together? And we'll get some of those questions. Elementary, Monday and Tuesday as an example, Group A. The students will be in person for instruction from 8:30 to 12:30. Students will transition home with a bag of lunch. Teacher will have their lunch and then their prep time, and then students will either participate in independent work remotely in the afternoon or attend a specialist class, art, PE, music, etc. Group B will have their specialist class remotely in the morning, followed by independent, a combination of a lot of things, but independent work or online. We're still working that piece out, to be very frank. But that is in general how the schedule will break down. Elementary, middle and high school, Group A and B switch on that Thursday, Friday. So if you're Group A, you're in person Monday, Tuesday. And if you're Group B, you are in person here Thursday, Friday. Okay. Yep, 7:40. Oh, that's 75. Thank you. 7:45 to 11:47. Thank you. I knew that it was around there. So we will. People have asked about schedules. What will it look like? Will it be structured? And yes, it will be. We put up here just as an example the middle school and high school schedule. We will have examples of all schedules in our on the website. But as you can see, and if you're sitting at home going, I do not understand this rotating schedule, that's okay. Just ask your middle schooler or your high schooler because they do. So
let me explain that just a little bit. So students normally have A through G days and their schedule rotates. Students have 7 classes. So if you just look at the A column here, your student on an A day, if they were in person on Monday, Tuesday, for example, they would have classes A, B, C, D, E. They would have 5 classes before they're dismissed with their bag lunch to go home. The next day on Tuesday, they would have B, C, D, E, F. So if you go down the column. When students go home, teachers have their lunch, they have their prep, and then the teachers would teach F and G on the first day to the remote students. So every day the teachers have some in-person students in front of them and some remote students in the afternoon in front of them.
So to make this easier, you could literally just put in your child will, in fact, at the middle and high school, and of course at the elementary, though the elementary, they'll have just their classroom teacher. Math, ELA, science, whatever it may be, it'll be filled in, and it might be a little bit easier to follow. But a lot of the questions we received is, will middle and high school switch classes? Will they transition? And the answer to that is, for the middle and high school, yes. At the elementary, they will not, and we'll get to that a little bit. So cohort schedules lunch questions. So a lot was asked about lunch in terms of why are we not able to why can't students eat lunch in school? And it really is, quite frankly, a space issue for us, given the current requirements. We've talked about this phase 2 of this, of hybrid, because we do have, at least in development, this hybrid model in which the kids are here all day. They're still in cohort though. So cohort A would still be Monday, Tuesday, but they would be here all day. okay? We are still trying to work some of that out because in order to do that, we will have to use all available space, including the gyms, to actually have lunch in. And as you can imagine, we're trying, if we have to do the gym for lunch, how do we have PE? Because PE has to be spaced out, et cetera. So it made sense for us to start small, quite frankly, and get some of these kinks worked out. Because once we get to transportation and busing, a lot of our headaches come from that. And so people have asked, well, when will we transition to this entire, this phase 2? And quite frankly, the answer is that when the state, hopefully, as we get better, as we get healthier, that the requirements might change or loosen up, and we can put more kids, together, safer, whatever that should mean. But we're definitely going to need some guidance on that, and also look to see how we will utilize our largest spaces, more likely the gyms, quite frankly, and see what that can do for us in terms of lunch. So it's not that we certainly tried, and we're going to continue to try, but it's best at this point to really take it slow, especially around transportation, drop off, etc. The cohort schedule that a lot of folks, again, wanted to see what a basic schedule looked like. And we hopefully, at least satisfied you a little bit for that. And there'll be more exemplars. But many folks asked, how does my child get picked for a cohort? Either A or B. C came, when we get to special education. D, which is, of course, full remote. And in terms of A and B, the first question, of course, is, are you comfortable, or is your child going to return to school? Are they going to be part of either? Are they willing to be part of, or able to be part of cohort A or B? That's question one. And at that point, we need to look at that, as we've talked about, take siblings or family members. And by the way, folks that will just sort them by last name. Well, many households are blended. We don't have this, many of us don't have the same last names of our siblings. So we have to look at addresses and see who is living where, quite frankly, and with who. And to make sure that they are all in the same cohort. And then we have to look at sheer numbers, but it could very well break down after that down to alphabet. So to be in cohort A or B really is a function of family first, and to see and to balance, because remember, we can only fit so many kids in a classroom based on the math, and we'll have to look at that. In terms of cohort D, in terms of full remote, how do we facilitate that? Well, very soon, after the school committee, because the school committee must approve the plans, I believe by August 10th. Once that happens, and they approve the plan, then we are going to reach out, and quite frankly, parents, guardians, you'll have to declare one way or another, because this is important. Once we establish who is in cohort A, B, and D, it is a math problem. So many kids in the rooms, if so many kids going to be out, okay. Because many of the questions became, well, if I want to come back after the first semester or quarter, things, it won't be an immediate transition, quite frankly, because if, again, I'll just pick on the third grade because I always use the third grade, but if the third grade, all the third grades have exactly 11 kids in their classroom, because by the math, that's exactly how many they can per cohort. And someone would, a parent or, says, well, gee, I'd like to go from full remote into cohort, and I'd like to start Monday. That's not, we won't be able to facilitate that immediately. There'll have to be a time frame. We'll have to look at space. It won't be automatic, and it won't be immediate. So that's something that is important to understand, because again, it really does boil down to a math problem. If there is space, then that's fine. And I want to talk about space for a minute. Folks have said, well, geez, you know, got all this space here, got all this space there, we have a building here. It also boils down to teachers, the number of teachers. Again, when we first talked about, and let's use the elementary, there were 26, 27 kids per class, and that's with 4 teachers. So the 3rd grade, I don't have the class average, but it was somewhere around 26 or 27. Well, now we cannot put 26 or 27 in that classroom. And so you, again, by doing the math, you need classrooms, which we have, but then it boils down to teachers, the number of teachers. When you multiply that by, you know, 5, 6 grades, the number of teachers become, or staff members become, of course, untenable and can't be done. So it isn't just a matter of space. We have physical space in some places, we just don't have the teachers. At the middle school, I'll be very candid. We do not have the number of teachers it would take to spread them out 6 feet, nor do we have the space. We're pretty tight. So I want to make sure I say that because I keep saying space, because space is important, but by multiplying that, it does boil down to staffing. Okay. So rigor in instruction. A lot of questions about how will, you know, instruction take place. To be candid, a lot of this is we're still developing because one, we need the plan. We need to understand what do we have exactly. But also a lot of this is very brand new. And yes, folks have said, well, geez, you've been working on this since March. Yes, we have, but we haven't been able to really work together on this. And so that, in getting with the schedule here in a bit, we'll talk about how we'll train teachers and staff. But we've already heard you've already read the slide in terms of what the expectation is. Whether you're remote, whether you're hybrid, the expectation is that work needs to be completed. Grades will be issued. Work has to be timely, you know, all the things that we're very used to. That's the expectation. You know, one of the questions is, what would the students be graded on and what will they be held accountable for? Well, they're going to be held accountable for all their classroom assignments. You know, so just like, you know, when I say just like before, it's really just a matter of how we do business in schools. Folks ask, would it be possible to only do core classes and math, English, science, history in person in school? I understand the energy behind that question. First off, we value the unified arts, but on a technical sense, many of them are required. They're required. So you need a balance. You need the whole you need the whole palette in terms of instruction. How will students that are required to take lab, biology, or anatomy be able to do so fully remote? There is an advisory on that. The state has issued an advisory. Guess what? It'll be up on the website. But ultimately, if you are full remote and you are doing a lab, basically the suggestion is that the teacher themselves would do the lab and folks would be watching the lab happen. And, you know, activities could be based around that. Is it optimal? No. But, you know, those are the type of guidances that we have received. When we start talking about unified arts, music, PE, they have delivered a guidance on those. Many of them cannot be done inside right now, quite frankly. So we're going to have to think differently until we can, again, either the guidance changes or we become a little bit healthier, I guess. But almost every area does have a guidance. And so, again, we need to adhere to those, and we're going to shape our instruction around them. How often will feedback be given to students on their work? The schedule and grading requirements this year will be more closely a mirror of normal school year than last spring. Absolutely. When I talk about what what I will propose as the new school calendar, you know, you'll see those things such as teacher parent conferences, you know, like you would see every other year. Will that be different this year? We don't know, because generally they happen for some at the in the fall and in the spring. But there will be an opportunity to reach out to teachers and discuss work, and we'll again be able to highlight that as we move forward. Are we also, let's see, are AP classes going to be virtual? AP classes will be held on a hybrid basis like other high school classes. AP students may assume additional homework obligations given national standards for AP rigor. So quite frankly, the answer would be the same, right? If someone were to ask that class, ask that question, pardon me, pre-COVID. Supply lists. That's a great question. Do we have supply lists? I got to be frank. I'm not sure what to ask for. I'm not sure what to teach. You normally say, well, could you please bring in some wipes? The Clorox wipes. Good luck. So we're trying to, I know folks have probably got a dozen in their basement and probably don't want to give some up. The district, of course, has been busy stockpiling its own cleaning materials. So just as an idea, just as an aside, I'm gonna get with these building principals to see what exactly that entails. But that was a great question. And we hadn't been thinking about that. Okay, so that's about it for the questions that were received. Will kids ever use lockers? And we already talked about that. We cannot use the lockers at the middle and high school. So until we either get further guidance, but we'll not be able to use the lockers. Special education. What about, how are students with IEPs going to be addressed? Was one of the bigger questions, and we'll get to that in a sec, as we move forward. But overall, most students will attend 2 days as part of the hybrid, right? They'll either be in cohort A, cohort B at some point, right? And they too will have their services delivered through a mix of in-person and remote. As much in-person as possible, unless families prefer remote. So for those folks whose children are receiving services or have received services, this will certainly sound very familiar, although the framework will look a bit different. Some students in full-day special education classes may attend up to 3 or 4 days, depending. And again, that'll be worked out through the teams. I'm sorry? And that's the cohort C. So I'm sorry. So some students in full day, that's really the cohort C. The special education department will reach out to parents with information about hybrid and remote service in late August. Again, still trying to gather the information and move it forward. Again, please reach out to the special education department with questions. And really, a lot of this discussion is going on at the CPAC meetings. And there's one coming up on August 13th from 4 to 5:30 via Zoom. So folks, if you're part of this conversation now and you have more questions, that is a great place to start. And certainly you can call the special education office. And I'm just looking to make sure I didn't miss any of the CPAC. Okay. So So what determines which student belongs in group C? A lot of those questions. A student with IEP will be assigned to either cohort A or B, as I had said, like everyone else, right? Students who spend 80% plus of their school day in special education placements with the same teacher will be offered instruction as members of both A and B cohort. They work with the same teacher and peer group through pre-K. Students with IEPs will also attend both, pre-K students with IEPs will also attend both A and B days. Again, obviously it's individualized. So if you have a question about your child, a circumstance, it really, you really should be reaching out to the special education office to speak, directly to manage somebody in the office. Okay, busing. Okay. I think it goes without saying that any fantastic, wonderful plan that we ever could have dreamed up starts and finishes with transportation. The survey revealed initially, right, that 60% parents, would, or 417 parents would be driving their child. I'm also aware that when we put this survey out, many folks thought, hoped, prayed that would be coming back full day. Realizing, of course, that a shortened school day, at least in person, in terms of a work schedule, is problematic, and I certainly understand that. But so we need a commitment from families in order to manage the buses, because the state has put out its capacity for these buses, and there's a diagram which will be up on the website. But so if you, as I said earlier in the presentation, if a normal 83 passenger bus, which when we roll that 83 passenger bus, that bus is full in the morning, for most mornings. In the afternoons, people say, well, I don't see a lot of kids on, well, there's sports and, there's things after school. But ultimately, we're full on those 83 passenger. Well, now we can only fit 27 on there. And they're generally staggered, depending on one child in this seat, back in this seat. A 77 passenger bus now can fit 25, and a normal, which is generally what we have, right, the 29 passenger, can fit 9. As you can imagine, this is troubling because either you quadruple the number of buses that you have, which, by the way, come at a cost. It's, those things just, they're not cheap. But also it starts to beg the question about, well, if I can only run a bus with 9 or so many buses at 9 kids, and I have so many folks who are going to be dropping their children off, they've opted to do that. What does that do to traffic patterns, especially around Templeton Elementary, et cetera? So we're looking at that. But ultimately, we're going to need a commitment, because I'll just pick one of the buses, that on that normal 83 passenger bus, there'll be 27 bus passes, in a sense, be able to be passed out, because it can't be the situation in which you're running late. We've all been there. You're running late, you usually drop, your child off, but you can't just go take the bus today. That won't be an option, because those seats will already have been, quote unquote, I say filled, but the potential is that there's somebody already in that seat. This has been the bane of everyone's existence in the state right now in terms of transportation. No, it's not optimal. No, it's not convenient. It's ludicrous, quite frankly. But these are the guidelines that we have been given. Yes, buses will roll with windows wide open. Yes, they have to wear their masks. I'm not sure what happens during a rainstorm or February. Apparently, they'll figure that out, or we'll have to figure it out. But we're going to have, those are the conditions in which we're operating. Yes, we will clean the buses in between. We have to, between runs, etc. So there weren't, when in terms of busing, it was more frustration, quite frankly. They weren't, I didn't receive a lot of questions. I received a lot of statements. And they were, there were frustration, which I can absolutely understand. But some of the questions that, will there be an option for busing in one direction, i.e. the parent drives them and, drives them to school in the morning, and they need to take the bus, in the afternoon? Yes, but it's got to be consistent. It's got to be every day. It can't be intermittent. Bus pass would be issued for that direction. So, it becomes a bit of a, a tracking nightmare. But if we're going to try to get as many people, or pardon me, as many children as we can on these buses. A question about special education transportation came up, and most of those transportation modes of transportation are smaller vans. They too have a diagram in which how many kids can fit, and we'll have that up on the site as well. Of course, it's few and far between how many kids you can put into a van, if you can obviously imagine. Let's see, however, how many kids are on the bus stop? Okay, the bus stop. Well, how many kids are going to be at a bus stop? I don't know. And how would we manage that was the question. We're not. the district will not be able to manage the bus stops themselves. When I drive here to work in the morning, usually the middle high schoolers are, looking pretty tired. They're just kind of staying, but we're going to have to practice, safe distancing. The elementary, when I drive through, I see parents at a lot of stops, that'll have to be really monitored and managed in that way. Will buses be staggered times of bus runs? That is not out of the realm of possibility. I think I said that. I mean, we're going to have to look at all this, but does that mean that certain grades come this time to this time and other grades go? Yeah, it could very well be, unless folks just, decide that they're just going to drive all their, everyone's going to drive their child. That becomes another issue. Carpooling has been asked, and the official answer on that is that if you as a parent, feel comfortable with whoever you're going to carpool with or give a ride to or have your child ride, that's fine. That's up to you. Matter of fact, please do. It's one less car, but again, that's really kind of a personal decision that you'd have to make. Let's see, when will we be notified about busing schedules? When will we be notified the busing schedule? And it's a great question, but as soon as people return the busing forms, which we're going to be pushing out very soon, and once we know how many and who will be riding those buses, we can develop the routes, because we're going to have to redo all the routes. And so that is, of course, quite labor intensive, and we're going to be getting on that as soon as possible. Okay, Kate, next group. Technology. So a ray of sunshine, quite frankly. We weren't really able to, really utilize all that we do have for technology, because it was such an abrupt, ending on March 13th. But in terms of technology and our infrastructure, Mike and his crew have done a fantastic job. We, in fact, have a Chromebook, in these buildings for every single student that we have enrolled. So we literally, and we are going to be a one-to-one district. Okay. So folks were asking, we're talking about the backpacks, and I know that I'm going to get questions if I'm not receiving them already about, oh my God, my child's got 84 pounds of books, carrying them around. We're changing. Some of these things are changing. Many of the textbooks that we purchase now, as part of it, come with ebooks, right? They're online, etc. And so it wouldn't be such a, every single book in your bag type of situation. But the Chromebook, in fact, everyone will have a Chromebook, period. How we're going to roll that out, if you haven't already received one from the district, we'll have to talk about that. We're getting them programmed now. That it's labor intensive, as you can imagine. They have to be configured a certain way. The good news is that 96% of our families reported having reliable internet. For those folks who do not have reliable internet, and we know who we've reached out, and they've reached out to us, and we know who you are, we have written and have received a grant. And so we will be able to offer supplement internet access for families with unreliable service. And once we get, they're working with a vendor right now, but we'll be pushing more information out, but we'll be able to help those families who don't have a reliable service. Again, the Chromebooks will provide to all students, and they need these to gain the access to our remote learning. Folks have asked, can I use my own computer? Can I use my own laptop? Sure, but we will have, in fact, a Chromebook for every student enrolled in this district. I think that's probably it for technology. But we also have some other things that are coming in terms of learning platforms, et cetera, which we'll talk about later. Okay, technology. Next, extended day. There are some things that there are some topics that did not warrant a slide, quite frankly. We didn't receive a lot of questions. There were 5 or 6 questions about extended day. There will be no extended day program at this time. The requirements are too stringent. The number of staff needed and there are so few kids allowed into these programming with the numbers and ratios, we will not be able to offer extended programming at this time. School choice. I said this, I think, at the school committee meeting. I hope. I want to say this again. If you are speaking about homeschool, literally homeschooling your child, that you need to write a letter to the central office letting us know that you are planning to homeschool your child, and you have to create a plan, a homeschooling plan. By the way, this is by statute. This isn't just a Narragansett thing, and you have to submit it for our approval. Once you are approved for homeschooling, you are not technically a member of this school district. Okay, so folks have said, well, if I homeschool my child and I want to be in the band, or I want to, you are your own little school, so to speak. So if you're school choice, that's very, very different. So a lot of questions were, hey, if I'm a school choice parent and I want to go full remote, do I lose my school choice status? And the answer to that is no. If you go remote and you're school, you will be a school choice student. If you homeschool at that point, you no longer are part of the Narragansett Regional School District. Okay, so those are those really the only two questions that we received in terms of either school choice or homeschool. And as I was looking at the questions, some were confused as to which program they'd be part of. Athletics. Will there be athletics? We don't know. MIAA is waiting for, I believe, September 14th or 15th to see how it all falls out with the state, et cetera. We're still waiting on guidance from the state. As I've said, the interesting piece to this is that, and in speaking with the commissioner, although this is not an automatic, it's, again, I wouldn't write this in pen, as they say, but if you're full remote, a very good possibility that you will not be allowed to play sports. Again, if you're so compromised, that you have to be at home, to play sports would be putting you at risk. That is not an official stance from the district, nor I believe the state, but those are some of the things that they're discussing at this point. But we are still waiting to see if there's going to be fall sports, and if there are fall sports, which fall sports will actually be played. Pre-KK, please really direct your questions to Ms. Saltizik down at Templeton Elementary. There were very few and far between, but they were very specific to children. And so I'm just going to really direct those questions down to ES. So that is a rough, over the 230 questions, or pardon me, the 130 or some odd questions. And how much time do we have? Okay, so these are the questions that I've received thus far. There are still new cases. How do you keep kids safe? Okay, question was, there are still new cases. How you go keep our kids safe? Hand washing, masks, social distancing, making sure that we adhere to those, to the protocols that we have been given. We have quite a bit of information and supporting documentation from physicians, et cetera, that feel that going to school with these precautions is not heightening the risk to a point where that folks feel that we shouldn't have school at all. So I would say that you would stay with the protocols. The next question is, why are we choosing to do half days and not full days? Breaking up halfway through doesn't make sense. I agree. I don't want to do that. I want kids here all the time, but given the requirement of either 6 or 3, this is how it breaks down. Quite frankly, I want to make sure I keep saying that over and over again. We didn't make this arbitrary decision in Narragansett. We're following the guidelines that were given to us by the state. Certainly not pushing it off on them, but we are following the guidelines that the state has set. So I understand that this is trying, especially in a working, class community. Yes, we are trying to do as best we can to keep our numbers down, to keep the infection rate down by doing all of these things so that we can get everybody back. That's the goal. But we do need to follow these rules.
And I just wanted to add to that, for example, at the middle and high, it's not a half day, it's 5 out of 7 classes. So we are trying to push that edge of when we dismiss to when we absolutely need to dismiss because we're sending kids home with a lunch. Of course, at elementary, they'll have a snack in the morning. They might even wind up having a snack in middle and high, but it's more than a half day, but it's the best we can do with lunching constraints right now.
No. Sorry. Not all parents can drive their kids to school. Absolutely, we know that. Especially when you've purchased an A3 passenger bus, not purchased, but you have a contract for one, you can only fit 20 some odd kids on it. So I completely understand that. Again, I'm going to have to lean back on we are following the guidelines as best we can. Wearing masks. I didn't bring that up before about mask breaks. All levels are working on providing folks, or kids, adults, everyone, an opportunity for mask breaks, and we'll have that more on that. But we understand that when you're sitting for that long or you're just having a mask on for that long, it's problematic. We get that, and we're working that into kind of the entire experience, so to speak. Again, you choose. We should be also choose. Okay, you can choose to do full remote. Okay. So the question becomes, you can choose full remote. We should be able to choose full in person. Yes, but 6 and 3, those requirements are preventing us from doing that. If your child is full remote, how will the child get the help needed with schoolwork? That'll be something that it'll be part of when I say the experience, but clearly there will be an opportunity to reach out not only to your teachers, but there'll be an opportunity for, I want to say extra help, but we're still talking with the union about all the parameters about changing this day. They certainly have been a good partner with us. We have a lot of conversations about this, but there's more to come on that.
Can I add to that? So on the full remote, of course, we're going to do the best we can to provide both remote learning classes to students, a combination of remote learning classes with a teacher, independent work, and guidelines about the types of work that students should do full remote. Right now, we have enough teachers to teach the in-person classes, Cohort A and Cohort B. And so we're trying to determine how we can repurpose some staff to facilitate or oversee those remote classes. So that's a work in progress at this point.
It says, okay, I would say no, you cannot share. It's, I would say no, you cannot share a student's name. We wouldn't share a student's name. The school will never share a student's name, but I know that the Board of Health, et cetera, when folks are, they've been tested positive that there's contact tracing, the school is not going to give out names. If nobody is eating in the cafeterias, why aren't you using them for classes? We are. We're going to have to. Probably the special areas classrooms or something to that effect, but there won't be many spaces that are not going to be utilized wherever they are in these buildings. Someone has offered tents. We may reach out to you. Thank you. My school, yes, folks have been removing tables and furniture in their classrooms to put as many folks, or at the safe distances, and in some cases we can do a full day. In other cases, but we need more people. So it's again, it's a bit of a math issue. So it's going to be, I don't know. Okay. Grading is not really fair if everything is online. Just saying remote doesn't work, period. Sure. We became teachers to actually teach in person. But the grading will be, in fact, be present. If you are going to go all remote, if that's the case, then the expectations will be the same.
And I wanted to add to that is something that the state has told us, that we need to have grading in place, and we need to have attendance in place. So those are part of the guidelines that we've received from the state.
So the high school Zooms were actually structured like a scheduled class. Yes, they did. They really were focused in establishing that routine, and you will definitely see that type of work K through 12. Okay, let's see. Okay, let's see. Zero times. So in terms of planning, and I'm sure you've heard, if not on the news, that negotiated with the MTA and the other teacher unions to, one, reduce the actual school year, meaning instructional days, to 170. You've also have lowered the hours required, 990 to 935 at the middle high school, approximately, I believe, 900 to 854 at the elementary. But what that means is that there will be 10 days that the teachers will be coming in for training. And you can't move those days around. It's got to be before school. It's got to be for training. There's a lot coming at this point in time. So, and I'm glad this reminded me that this was one of the questions, is that when will school start? Which, talk about getting lost into the details, but the school committee, approves the calendar. So what I do is recommend, and they vote to approve. I'm going to recommend that we start on September 14th, like many, many, many districts around us. Because when you count back the 10 days, that's the 10 days that teachers will have to be provided training, etc. And the last day of school will be June 11th. Now, here's some good news, I suppose, is that the state has said that what happens if you have a snow day? Can you just, in fact, do an all remote? And the answer to that was yes. So no snow days this year. Let's try to look at some of the positives. But that has been, that was asked and granted. So 14th is what my recommendation will be to the school committee, is the start, September 14th, and June 11th would be the last day, but that is just simply a recommendation. Okay, if I felt improved over time, the technology got better as we went along. Yeah, thank you for that. So it did improve over time. Was it where we wanted it to, in terms of, I'm talking about the online instruction? Yeah, it was not. It was not. But I got to tell you, folks really did build the plane while they were flying it. We don't teach remotely. That's not what we do. The high school had quite a bit of experience, I think, more than in the other areas. But I really think that the middle and elementaries came along very nicely. They really had to learn a whole new skill set very quickly and intermittently. Because remember, folks, we were supposed to come back in 2 weeks. On March 13th, it was a matter of whether you're going to be out a week or two, and it was up to you. Well, we all know how the story ended. So there was a lot of stop and start, but we will be ready for that as we move forward. I can say that.
I want to add to that too, that initially the guidance from the state was more along the lines of reinforced learning that had happened, because again, echoing Dr. Cassian, we expected to be out for a shorter period of time. So the state initially said, reinforce learning that's already happened, attend to students' social emotional needs, make sure you check in with students. So there was a less rigorous expectation for a number of weeks initially when we started remote learning in the spring. We transitioned away from that at the guidance of the state to teaching new skills when we knew that we were going to be out for the rest of the year. And our teachers really did a fabulous job of learning to teach in an environment they never were trained to teach in. But moving forward in the fall, we have, if we had to go to full remote, we have a plan that includes classes and a schedule and so forth. So it'll be more rigorous for all students if we, because of health reasons, need to transition to full remote.
Thank you, Kate. So they said they'll be at school. So they'll go to school for 5 classes and then come home for 2. Basically, yes. That's their typical day. So we're trying to keep it as normal as possible, or as regular as possible. Why wouldn't you just have teachers switch rooms? In some cases we are. At the high school, it's a little bit different because if I have English first block, not everybody in my English class is going to go to the same place, right? So we go in different places, which begs the next question. It sounds like there'll be too many kids between the hallways. No, we're going to use the Hannaford's model. Quite frankly, there will be the the arrows on the floor and all of that, and signage, etc. And so they'll be transitioned just like if you're going to the grocery store, I guess. So PE fields to use. Let's see, mothers. Okay. Has the school committee submitted their initial plan to a DOE yet? I think there were, yes. So we submitted, the first draft, so to speak. The state is going to give us feedback on that. That was the plan. We submitted it on time. Once the plan is that we're going to get that feedback this week, quite frankly. We'll incorporate whatever changes that they may have or suggestions. We need to incorporate that. But by August 10th, give or take a day or two, the plan has to be voted by the school committee. I also want to say one more thing about all of what I'm speaking about. The school committee ultimately has to vote the plan, right? All 3. Also, though, and I've already talked about this too, an important part is, in discussions with the unions. Again, this is not just a fait accompli. It's what I'm saying here is what our recommendations are, right? So everything I'm saying is really what our recommendation will be. I'm answering questions, but certainly do not want to make any type of assumption that, or anyone else feel that this is just a done deal. So I just want to make sure I say that for the record. Before we can choose an option, are we comfortable knowing what will be required from parents on, okay. Before we can choose which option we are comfortable with, knowing what will be required from the parent on a daily basis for full versus hybrid is really important to know. Well, I'm hopeful that these questions and discussing has helped that. The requirement, to be quite frank, is that if your child is in A, right, cohort A, that on Monday and Tuesday, they'll be home a little afternoonish, and I'm ballparking that. And then when cohort B is in person, which is Thursday, Friday, that your kid's going to be home. And in terms of the workload, though, I will tell you that is what we are really focusing on. We understand that a lot of teaching was going on, yours truly, and there was a lot of, we're wearing a lot of hats as parents. We hope to normalize that as much as possible, and we know we can do that if we have kids in front of us every day.
I want to add to that, that it's a little bit of a chicken and an egg question, right? Parents want the information before they decide if they go full remote or send their students, but we need that information to plan for buses and how many students we can fit in the classroom. So we're doing the best we can to plan for families who want to go full remote, but planning for families who want to go full remote involves knowing how many families that is, what grade levels that is, what teachers we may or may not have available at those grade levels to do that instruction, and marrying those two groups, the students who are going remote with the teachers that we have available. And some of that really can't take place until we know who's going remote and what teachers we have that may or may not be available to do that. So we are doing the best that we can with that. And of course, we'll be providing standards-based education, but it is going to be a combination of in-person, it's going to be a combination of remote lessons with a teacher and independent work. And having said that, we understand that families will make a decision based on their individual needs and their individual health circumstances, but nothing is going to replace the experience of being in a classroom with a teacher. We'll do the best we can to mirror that.
The next question is, where are the guidelines for Group C? It says the guidelines, but where are they? Well, we spoke about them, but in essence, if you have a question specific, reaching out, but ultimately, what determines which student belongs in Group C? I read this earlier. A student with IEP will be assigned to cohorts A or B, like their non-disabled peers. Students who spend 80% of their school day in special education placements with the same teacher will be offered instruction as members of both A and B cohort, working with the same teacher and peer group throughout. And then pre-K, K, students' IEPs will also attend both A and B days. So again, when we get more formalized about this, you'll see that, but that's ultimately it's, so again, the attendance meetings, et cetera. So you'll have to attend the meetings, but that's ultimately the guidance. And could you, yeah, because I can't see the next question. So I believe the next question was how about having other older, okay. So this came up, how about having older grades be all remote and the littles in pre-K 2-3 be full in person? We looked at that. But I think that what is important is, although older students could theoretically be alone at home, I understand that, but it's important to have them in front of us as well. To have instruction, from teachers. Just because you're old enough to be at home doesn't make remote any better or any easier. And so I think that that's one of the issues. But two, I got to tell you, if in fact, we start getting into what about sports and all these other things, I think that that's a new, again, not for us to say, but that would add to some different conversations. And also, that's a lot of kids outside that are being remotely taught, and you would need, we would have to think about that completely different. I realize that's what full remote is, but we want students in place as much as possible in front of us. Someone asked about why can't the elementary just go full day? We could. We have a problem with lunch. We talked about that. Why can't they eat in the classrooms? Well, they're sit 3 feet from each other and they have to wear a mask. That's a problem. You can't eat with a mask. And we talked about the cafeteria, but also the number of staff. It isn't space at the elementary, because someone had asked a question about Phillipston. It isn't space. It's a number of teachers that we would need. Again, 11 or 12 per classroom. It's going to add to any particular grade in between 4 and 5 teachers, depending. And that is the problem at the elementary. If we could figure that piece out, we would have a different conversation. But again, that's some of this Rubik's Cube type of conversations we've been having about either space versus staff. Again, why can't we use the classrooms that were used when Templeton Center were here? We are. Those classrooms are going definitely to be used. Again, we're trying to spread out as much as possible. The middle school, it has the double whammy of not enough space and not enough folks if you were to spread them out by 6. So we need as many rooms as we can possibly get a hold of. Let's see.
Just simply, when you think about, if you had, just to make the math problem easy, if you had 24 kids in an elementary class and you can now fit 12 and you have the space, you now need another teacher in order to bring them back. So that's the difficulty we're up against, given budget as well as safety, social distancing, and other requirements.
I'm trying to get through some of these because some of these are questions, and When did the district decide to create? Oh, so when did the district decide to create the position of assistant superintendent, and where did that money come from for the position? Kate, as of before July 1, was the chief academic officer, and then poof, we made her the assistant superintendent, which is great because we can make her work even harder. And we just all had to do was change her name. But thanks for pointing that out. Understand the 5 classes in person, 2 remote. The kids and staff are already there. What is the reason for sending them home to do 2 remote classes? Well, again, it's about that's a good question. We're trying to keep, it's about lunch. A lot of it is about lunch. We're trying to figure out a way to stay within the guidelines and to give them lunch. And yeah, we're talking about gyms, we're talking about all that, but that is going to require purchasing of tables. We need to put the covers down on the floor. There's no way that we could do, I would not do this unless I had vetted it out first. There's expenses to that. And also we're going to be utilizing that space as let's say we use the gym as a cafeteria. Well, you can't use the gym and a cafeteria at the same time. That's problematic. So but we are trying to figure that type of stuff out. Plan for when the school resumes full in person school year, or is this the final plan? Is there a plan for when school will resume full in person the school year, or is this the final plan for the entire school year? I hope not. Quite frankly, we are prepared to do any variation of what the state will allow us to do by the, whatever their requirements or protocols are. If they said, okay, everybody, I don't know, if they said, look, everybody back, we could do it. if we would just need some time to maybe transition, but we are trying to, so I think that we don't want this to be the final plan. I want things to work out before the spring. Of course I do. But I know what I need to do now, and that's how we're approaching it. Since we just had this close, okay. We figure out what. Okay. Literally I'm looking. I can't do it every day. Assuming no. Yes, there is no extended day. I agree. About okay. Okay. These are a lot of comments. I'm looking for questions, so I apologize. Until there's the vaccine opening schools. Up to one side. Hold on. Can we look at that? Okay. Oh, I'm glad I saw this. So, folks, folks came to me multiple times last year to let me know that they had seen potentially somebody from Narragansett, let's say, working at Market Basket or I don't know, Wendy's, like 11 o'clock in the morning. Well, first off, folks, I wasn't about to drive out and actually verify that. Those businesses, we have reached out to them. The hours that are posted here, my expectation is that those businesses adhere to school, the times of school. I know that Athol has done the same thing. I know that Gardner will as well. I realize that folks, folks feel that, okay, well, then they can do remote whenever they have time, but they can work here and there. That's not the case at all. And as a matter of fact, that depending on how old we're talking about, they need a work permit from us, and we just won't sign it, quite frankly. So it's important that we follow the rules because again, we didn't follow up last year's, there was a lot going on, but this year we are notifying businesses that there is a time frame in which kids are expected to be being educated, and the expectation is that they're not working, and so I'm glad that jogged my memory. Chromebooks you gave. What happened to the Chromebooks you gave out last year? I heard they were written off and not required to return them. No, they're not written off. They do need to return them at some point. Some of them were so outdated that when they did in fact stop working because they were past life, we just simply said you can either return them to us or if I want to say I'm trying to think of the right word, recycled, etc. Some of them were past life, but no one just gave them out and expected never to return. We expect them all to be returned. If you're scared of your kid, for the kids, okay. If you're keeping kids home, Okay. I'm looking for more questions. Together, okay. How will we know when school starts? So school will start. It's my plan to put this proposed calendar before the school committee, before the next school committee meeting, which I would have to put it on the agenda, but I do need to vet it out a little bit more. I'd like to put it on this week's, we'll see. But within the next week or so, you know, we'll have the calendar hopefully approved and out there. But I would say, quite frankly, that if we're to follow the 10 days that was negotiated at the state level for training, that when you count back, it just makes sense that the September 14th is the day that at least school starts. Again, I don't make that decision. I just put it before the school committee, and they will need to ultimately decide. Okay, how long are classes going to be? If there's 5 out of 7 classes on those 2 days, I don't have the calendar in front of me because it was on the website. Oh, I do. So at the, the middle and high school is 46 minutes. And the elementary, well, if you have it.
Elementary are self-contained within the classroom, so they'll be with the classroom teacher from, I believe the list says 8:30. Oh, I have it here. Maybe I don't have it here. From the start of day until the end of day in that self-contained classroom, and the teacher will divide up that time between the subjects because it's one teacher. But the classes are 46 minutes at middle and high.
Someone asked, will there be a designated remote elementary school teacher for each of the younger grades? Not a designated per grade. We're trying, again, we don't have firm numbers in terms of total, but there won't be, you know, a third, a fourth, a second, a kindergarten, you know, we're going to have to look at and see what the need is there. You just touched upon a bit regarding staffing, but with
the reason for that is that all of the elementary teachers that we currently have are assigned to an in-person class with students. So we need to see how we can manage our staff in order to accommodate the remote learning of students.
Question about graduation. I love when people think ahead. Will it still be on June 4th? Yes, because I'm just going to will it to happen on June 4th. So that's the goal. Okay, so I think that we've hit, and again, we're coming up on to the end here. And again, I'm searching frantically here. You know, for questions. This is the place to do it. Actually, this is the place to do it. Actually, I'm glad people are getting to know. Thanks. Okay. I'm looking for questions. Our substitute's going to, okay. Our substitute teachers going to be trained to be able to carry out remote learning if the teachers start to become positive? No, well, so ultimately what we want to do, and we're trying to develop that plan as well, is through the grant that the state has, you know, has offered, which hasn't come to fruition yet. But what we'd like to do is to hire full long-term subs, which, and under normal situations we could not do, but the state has given us the ability, the waiver to do that. Normally it was just, you know, could only be a long-term sub for X amount of time before you had to hire a, you know, a certified teacher in that role. So they've relaxed that requirement because we know that we potentially may need folks to help us out. And so what I'd like to do with, once the grant does become available, the money's become available, is to post those positions. Also, they are granting quite a few emergency licenses, and there's stipulations around that, but I think somewhere close to 3,000 have already been issued statewide. Again, this is not just someone who things they can be, there's requirements, but an emergency license, you know, is certainly, we may need to go to that again in terms of the state if folks need to be trained. So, or to be licensed. So I think that we're definitely working on that, and that the plan is there. We're just waiting to make sure that the monies are available. Is there going to be a step-up day? Thank you, because I missed that question before. Yes, there will be at the various levels. Again, the principals are working that out, and there will be a step-up day. It might take a few days to make sure a step-up day happens, just given you know, who can be around and how many, etc. So, but yes, there will absolutely be that. What support and training have the teachers been provided to make remote process more effective of both staff and students? We currently have a Chromebook, I believe, not Chromebook, pardon me, a Google Classroom training going on right now, but that's what the 10 days have been designed for. And I think that we have answered a lot of questions. So I want to thank the folks who, you know, took an hour and a half of their day to sit through this. If you really liked it and you want to see it again, and hopefully I can remember everything I've said and to stay consistent, we'll be doing it again tonight at 5. But as always, if you should have any questions that weren't answered here, please forward them to us. This information will have a home on our webpage probably sometime tomorrow. All the documents, the FAQs, etc., and will be under its own page. So want to thank again TCTV for facilitating this. Of course, Susan Varney, who sits in the background, keeps everything moving. And thank all of you for your questions and your time. Take care.